I want you to just search for everything about us that isn't by us. Right? The two things that will happen is whoever is looking at that is going to freak out about the amount of stuff that's out there. And then they're going to freak out about what it actually is. It's going to differ company by company. It's going to differ sector by sector. But the greatest fantasy in the executive suite is, when I'm ready to do this, then we'll do something. But if I do nothing, nothing will happen. Not anymore. Not anymore. That used to be true of the media landscape. If I spent no dollars, no media is created about me. Now if I spend no dollars, none of this changes. Right? This is all going on hammer and tongs right now. And finding that ring of stuff that people are creating around you is probably a really good place to start. Thanks very much. I forgot this subliminal advertising. Liminal advertising, superliminal advertising. Whatever, you're getting a book free. I don't even know why I'm putting this up there. Should we take some questions? I don't know. I mean, I'm keeping you all from drinks, so it's.
I have one. How are you seeing, and this is actually a panel question close, but how are you seeing people interact with each other around the topic of healthcare?
Oh my goodness.
How is that changing how people are delivering and talking about healthcare?
It is, the healthcare is quite incredible right now, because in addition to the FDA coming and sitting on your head, there's also just an institutional sclerosis about dealing with the patient at all. I'll tell you two quick healthcare stories, both from a friend of mine who's a cancer doc. The first is that she had some postdoc students up with her at her research facility, and she was trying to remember the cancer stages. Stage 1, 2, 3, goes into 3, A, B, C. It's the progress of cancer. And it changes every now and again, and there's an official Bible where it says this is what the stages of pancreatic cancer look like and these are the symptoms. But because it's a little bit different every couple of years, you can't quite keep on top of it. So these postdocs were about to come out of a meeting and into her office, and she was going to talk to them about cancer stages, and she suddenly realized, I don't know if I remember the current ones or the last version. Now, fortunately, right, she's got a shelf this big of cancer, research manuals that her institution pays for at quite high price. Unfortunately for her, she had about 30 seconds. So she turned to Google, and Google sent her to Wikipedia. And the Wikipedia page on pancreatic cancer says not only these are the stages, but this is the change from Series 5 to Series 6. When the postdocs came in, she knew what she was talking about. On they go. They later went back, she and her husband later went back. The IP address from which that material came was in the Philippines. Right? This is global, right? The productive and sharing environment now is no longer limited nationally. Healthcare has historically been highly nationalized, and yet information is now sloppy. Several days later, the same friend gets a call from a group of patients who have a cancer community for pancreatic cancer suffering. And they said, do you want to be listed on our site? And she said, sure, why not? And they said, okay, well, we'll send you a questionnaire, and then we'll send somebody by to interview you. Right? This is an absolute reversal of the patient-doctor relationship. And then she gets this questionnaire, quite detailed, and the quid pro quo is if she doesn't do it, she doesn't go up on the site, and the deal flow doesn't come her way. Right? Patients' ability to recommend doctors to one another is now moving faster than any of the official national quality metrics, which have been slowed down by the fact that if the head of hospital just decides they're going to play the information out slowly or partially, the whole thing grinds to a halt, because of course all the quality people are all waiting until they have all the information in perfect order before they publish anything. The patients are not waiting. Right? So the transformation in healthcare is quite interesting. Chronic conditions in children and acute conditions in adults are the ones that are most catalytic of community. Right? If you have an ongoing problem with your child, the parents are there like white on rice. And if you have a short-term life-threatening problem yourself, particularly if it's rare, right? If there are a lot of people around you that have type 2 diabetes, you talk to them about it. If you've got Crohn's disease, you're on the internet all day. because you don't care where people live if they share your commonality. And that set of changes is rippling. The medical establishment doesn't even really know that that's happening yet. They're still at the phase of, patients are coming into my office with these printouts from these websites. They don't understand this source of information, site of coordination thing. They don't get that the same place the printouts are coming from, there's a huge catalyzed conversation, patient to patient, going on at the same time. But that, in my mind, the ability of all patients to act as a class in one way or another is going to be a huge effect on the healthcare system in the next 10 years. Another question? Sir?
Another question. Can you give us our thoughts between sort of Google's Android platform, iPhone, and we're sort of mobily challenged here in the U.S. compared to other countries?
Yes, we are.
And sort of, give us maybe sort of your view of what 09 might bring us, sort of as we look.
It's interesting. I teach at the Interactive Telecommunications program at NYU, and we've hosted this conversation for years. We have essentially faculty members who have each point of view, which is the phone a computer or is the phone a sensor? Right. If it's a computer, that means you push the applications down to the phone and you let the user do as much interacting locally as possible. It's what Symbian was meant to do but failed at, the operating system favored especially by Nokia. Computer as a sensor says, get the data off the phone, get it up into the cloud, deal with it up there. That's what Dodgeball is built on, that's what Loops is built on, and so forth. Where the phone is assumed to be just a transmitter of data into the network where you can do something with it. The iPhone is the first example that we've seen of a working, the phone is the computer. But because the interests of the carriers are inimical to rather than aligned with the interests of the handset manufacturers, unlike PC plus internet, right? More of these equals more dollars to Verizon, everybody's just happy. Every time the handset creates value for me that isn't captured by the carrier has to go to the people they wrote a bunch of 30-year bonds with and say, you know what, remember that chart we showed you about revenues that was like a hockey stick? Yeah, it's actually like a gentle slope. So that fight suggests to me that Android's progress will be only incremental, and that we will not see a non-fractured mobile space anytime in the next 2 to 3 years, any time in which you'd be planning a project. Which means that you get projects that are either targeted to the iPhone, they're on Android or experimental, but for things with real world, they're targeted to the iPhone, or they treat the phone as a sensor, or we think we're seeing more of this, or we're planning on more of this. Companies offering APIs and people repackaging it for all mobile devices on their own, which is to say, taking one step back from the developer community and saying, right, here's our content. We don't know how it's best shown on a BlackBerry versus a Palm, but you do, right? And if you look at, for instance, Howard Forums, which is the biggest community for cell phone geeks, often engineers from Nokia and engineers from Verizon will forward questions to Howard Forums because what the amateurs, what the customers have access to that the engineers don't, the customers have access to reality. That they're the ones who actually own a phone that's connected to a particular carrier in a particular city. And the hybridization of, I'm going to give you my content in the basic form and the knowledgeable users are going to repackage it for one another is one interesting low-cost solution. But we don't see any, the phone is a platform and we can just treat it like we treated the browser 12 years ago. We can just write it once and run it everywhere. The economics of the carrier business mean the carriers are going to be interfering with that, at least in this country, for the foreseeable future, unfortunately. They're coming to arrest me for keeping you away from the drinks, so why don't we go to drink? Thanks very much.